Born with the name Temujin, sometime in the middle 1150s to 60s AD, Genghis Khan rose from an unpromising and endangered childhood to become one of the world's most successful conquerors, ruling the largest contiguous empire in history by the time of his death some 70 years later in 1227. The conqueror of China, whose armies had ridden south and west into northern India and through the Middle East like a plague in the words of contemporaries, was still physically active in the last years of his life, and while accounts of his death differ, each one speaks to the vitality of the man. There's a story that says he fell from his horse on one of the hunting expeditions that his physicians had told him he would need to curtail because of his advancing age. Another account has it that he was shot by an arrow while fighting a battle. A third states that he was struck by lightning. Still another account declares that he died of a stab wound while fighting off a concubine who had tried to castrate him one night. All of the above make for a colorful and perhaps fitting end for the warlord who was responsible for the deaths and enslavement of millions of men, women, and children. But even more intriguing is the question of the location of Genghis Khan's burial place. The Khan's specific order was that his grave was to go unmarked and unknown by all. But is it possible that such a prominent and infamous figure in world history lies in state completely unrecognized? Before we delve into the riddle of the Great Khan's tomb, if you're interested in early access to videos and live chats with the creator of Intrigued Mind, consider subscribing to our Patreon. Your support will greatly help us keep the channel producing more intriguing content. In his book, Lost Histories, Exploring the World's Most Famous Mysteries, historian Joel Levy writes, "There is something particularly touching about a lost person. Perhaps it's that personal stories seem unfinished if they lack the concrete ending a defined resting place provides. When they finish in mystery, there is a natural urge to want to solve it. For a leader like Genghis Khan, who conquered more land than Alexander the Great in his lifetime, this sentiment is particularly apt. While there's a mystery as to the current location of Alexander's remains, for example, his tomb in Alexandria was known for centuries following his death. Augustus Caesar's mausoleum in Rome can be visited today, as can the site of Julius Caesar's assassination, and the site of St. Peter, the first pope's execution and burial on the Vatican Hill. The burial places of the ancient pharaohs at the pyramids of Egypt are some of the most widely recognized sites on the planet, all of which makes the puzzle over Genghis Khan's final resting place more perplexing. The mystery is perhaps magnified by the fact that the site has never truly been known, even in the immediate aftermath of Genghis Khan's death. Marco Polo, the Italian explorer who traveled to the Far East just 2 decades after the Khan's demise, offered a location in his extensive writings, saying, "You should be told also that all the Grand Khans and all the descendants of Genghis, their first lord, are carried to a mountain that is called Altay to be interred. Wheresoever the sovereign may die, he is carried to his burial in that mountain with his predecessors. No matter the place of his death were 100 days' journey distant, thither must he be carried to his burial." There is unfortunately no Altay mountain as Polo describes it in his tale. Instead, the Altai Mountains are a vast range stretching for more than 2,500 kilometers in the north of Mongolia and reaching into parts of China, Russia, and Kazakhstan. Polo's directions are little help in locating the final resting place of Genghis Khan. The next section of Marco Polo's book of travels relates one of the most famous details of Genghis Khan's death and funeral. "Let me tell you a strange thing too," Polo adds. "When they are carrying the body of any emperor to be buried with the others, the convoy that goes with the body doth put to the sword all whom they fall in with on the road. For they do in sooth believe that all such as they slay in this manner do go to serve their lord in the other world. They do the same too with horses, for when the emperor dies, they kill all his best horses, in order that he may have the use of them in the other world, as they believe. And I tell you as a certain truth, more than 20,000 persons who chanced to meet the body on its way were slain in the manner I have told." This tale relating to how the funeral cortege of Genghis Khan killed every living thing that crossed its path was repeated many times over the centuries. And if it were true that the great leader died while on campaign near the Yellow River in China, it would mean his procession did indeed have a lot of ground and settlements to pass on its way back to Mongolia. In later years, this story would be embellished and expanded so that in these accounts, the slaves who accompanied the Khan's body to burial were killed by soldiers to keep the location a secret, and these soldiers were in turn slain by other soldiers, and so on. In their book, Genghis Khan, His Life and Legacy, Paul Rechnevsky and Thomas Nivison Haining relate a story regarding the funeral cortege that may also shed some light on the immediate confusion regarding Genghis Khan's resting place. After taking a terrible revenge on the inhabitants of the city that the Khan's army had under siege at the time of his death and all of the surrounding countryside, The heavy cart carrying the Khan's body became stuck somewhere in the Muna Mountains at Ordos, in the modern Kangbashir district of the People's Republic of China. Relative to the advanced civilizations that they had conquered, the Mongols were still a nomadic and technologically underdeveloped people, and they lacked knowledge of embalming techniques. Mongol tradition was usually to leave a body in the open and allow nature to take its course. Having never had a leader the stature of Genghis Khan, whose return to the homeland plains from far afield after conquest was a priority, this was a new problem for his subjects. The senior tribal leaders accompanying the body made the decision to bury Genghis Khan where the cortege had come to a forced halt in order to avoid any further decomposition in the hot August weather. As a result, the remote and unassuming muddy spot in Inner Mongolia became the final resting place of the Khan, and because any who laid eyes on the body faced execution, its location quickly became lost, even to senior leaders. This modern theory is, however, contradicted by other works. In his book, Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World, Jack Weatherford writes that the funeral cortege did make it back to Mongolia, where they buried their fallen leader at an anonymous spot per the Khan's wishes. There was no marker like a temple or gravestone because, according to Mongol belief, the body of the dead should be left in peace and did not need a monument because the soul was no longer there. It lived on in the spirit banner. In addition to the effects of time, the spot was forgotten because an area of several hundred square miles was blocked off to all except Genghis Khan's family and a squad of specially trained soldiers who were stationed there to kill every intruder. This group of soldiers and their families and descendants, who became known as the Darkads, carried out their guard duty for 7 centuries. The only reason allowed for entering the Forbidden Zone, which became known as the Great Taboo, or Itkorig, was to bury a member of Genghis Khan's family. The discovery of The Secret History of the Mongols, a late medieval work originating in China but which went unknown in Europe for hundreds of years, added to the excitement and speculation caused by this fascinating piece of knowledge. A passage within the book says that Genghis Khan asked to be buried at Burkhan Khaldun Mountain, where he had fled in hiding during his early troubled years, and which he later admired for its beauty while leader of his people. A mountain by this name also existed within the Forbidden Zone guarded by the Darkad. Unfortunately, as Mongolian ethnologist S. Badam Katan points out, there were at least 5 mountains known as Burkhan Khaldun during the medieval period. This confusion leads us to other, more modern reasons for the continuing intrigue and the lack of a credible theory. The first is that Mongolia's sheer size and general remoteness meant that the archaeological revolutions of the 19th and 20th centuries almost entirely passed it by. Indeed, throughout the 20th century, Outer Mongolia was often used as a humorous phrase to describe somewhere literally or figuratively far away and hard to reach. The British politician Tony Benn famously described the House of Lords as a political Outer Mongolia. Unlike hotbeds of archaeological activity like Egypt and the Near East, Mongolia has never been in the center of civilizational interchange, so it stands to reason that certain prominent artifacts or locations remain unexplored and unexplained. Coupled with the country's seclusion is its size and general lack of development. As BBC Travel noted in 2017, Mongolia is a country that is more than 7 times larger than Great Britain, but has only 2% of its roads. Added to that is the fact that the traditionally nomadic Mongolian population is less than 5% that of Britain, meaning fewer networks of communities to pass on and record cultural history. Moreover, written historical records were not a feature of early medieval Mongol culture until after the dynasty founded by Genghis Khan settled in the highly developed Chinese and Persian areas that had come under their control. Cultural and political reasons might also explain the seeming enigma when it comes to Genghis Khan's grave. Starting in the early 1920s, Mongolia was taken over by communist Bolshevik forces whose allegiance was to Vladimir Lenin and later Joseph Stalin in Moscow. To limit the possibility of uprisings around its multinational empire, the Soviet Union sought to eradicate symbols and artifacts of national culture in place of their own socialist credo, and memorials to nationalistic leaders like Genghis Khan fell under this remit. The stern but alluring title of the Great Taboo was banned and replaced by the bureaucratically neutral classification, Highly Restricted Area. To ensure that no one came within even a day's journey of the possible location, the Soviets' highly restricted area was surrounded by another, lesser, but still heavily guarded, restricted area, 1 million hectares in size. It was only with the fall of the Soviet Union in the late 1980s that Mongolia was once again opened up to foreign travelers and free movement of its peoples. But even then, the Mongolians themselves remain ambivalent to the intrigue that their greatest leader's missing grave arouses around the world. On the one hand, there is the real fear that discovery of the gravesite would lead to robbery and desecration of historical treasures, as seen recently in countries like Iraq and Syria. At the same time, while they celebrate the undoubted genius and achievements of Genghis Khan on everything from postage stamps to liquor, this respect also extends to the great warrior's wish to lie undisturbed and at peace. There is then only the slimmest of chances that the real grave of Genghis Khan will be unveiled to the world. But until then, it will remain a puzzle for intrigued minds everywhere. For more videos on the most amazing forgotten parts of our history, be sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel, like the video, and leave your suggestions in the comments below.